Hey, thank you for joining us here on Island Sunrise. It's a little bit different today. Instead of being a photograph and something like the ocean, I'm talking to a friend of mine from Hawaii. It's Bear Woznick. Thank you very much for being here. You just coming off the win at Legends in Waikiki. And
Yeah, I just won the Legends division in Waikiki. Perfect 8-foot faces, 10-foot faces, just offshore trade winds. It was a blast.
Wow.
It was fun. Yeah.
What-
Stand-up paddle.
what I'm excited to talk to you about, you have a best-selling book that you did fantastic with, and then also you helped revitalize tandem surfing. And just want to talk about your book, in the Wave, A Surfer's Guide to the Soul,
Yeah.
and just spend a few minutes with you and share with people on Island Sunrises about what you're doing and what your goals are and what you've accomplished.
Now, I want to say aloha to everybody out there who's not necessarily in Florida. A lot of people check out your site from all over the world.
Yeah.
You get that morning little surfs up. Yeah, well, the book Deep in the Wave, A Surfing Guide to the Soul. So first of all, I do a lot of reading, and I've been writing most of my life, But for me, writing is, when I'm writing, I know my life is in balance, that life is good. And so I have a friend, her name is Melody Green. Her husband is Keith Green, or was. He passed away in a plane crash like 30 years ago. He was one of the first Christian rockers. And Melody was over at my house in Hawaii, and she goes, when I took her out surfing, she was kind of coming back from a stroke. And I was teaching her some of the life lessons, that the ocean has taught me as we were out there. And she said, "You got to write a book." And I said, "Well, I am writing a book." She said, "No, I mean it. You have to write a book, And so she made me go get a Mac, because she knew in my business I used my laptop and its Windows, and when you can get sucked down that vortex. So I went and got a Mac and I started working on this book. The moment I started writing it, I knew it would be published. And I had a great literary manager, Peter Miller. He lives down here in Florida now. He used to be up in New York City. And Hachette, the hottest publisher in the world right now, picked it up to my surprise and published it, 2 years ago. So yeah, it's quite a journey to write a book like that.
How much time did it take you to write the book? How many words? I'm always thinking about like chapters and words in a book, and
Well, it's like this. Everybody that writes books, they have that first book that they have to get out of their system. So I signed the contract with Hachette, and I wrote that book. And when I was all done with it, I thought, good, I got that out of my system, but that's really not what I think should be the first book. So I went to Hachette. The publishing deadline was only 4 months away, and I had spent 9 months working on that first version of the book. And they said, you're right, go with your vision, do what you feel you should do. And so then we wrote the book, Deep Adventure, A Surfing Guide to the Soul, because I felt like people kind of needed to know me before, you want to say certain things, but you have no right to say it if they don't really know who you are, So Deep Adventure, A Surfing Guide to the Soul, some people liken it to Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. But it's really used surfing, like the first chapter is my son dropping into 70-foot waves in Hawaii, and that's kind of where it starts from there and never lets up. People who read it don't put it down. A lot of people read it in their first sitting. It's about a 6-hour read, 250 pages or something. But it uses the arc of my life to talk story about a desire to get closer to God and a desire for intimacy with God. And so I'm a novitiate oblate at the Benedictine Monastery up in the North Shore of Oahu. I've actually known those people back since the 70s when I'd go to the Pecos Monastery up in Holy Ghost Canyon up by Santa Fe, right? And you know what a novitiate oblate is? It's like a white belt in karate. And I've been a novitiate for like 5 years. I never even got my yellow belt yet. But I love the Benedictine approach to, daily contemplation and intimacy with God. When I was up there praying, I really felt a strong sense from God that I really don't have anything new to say, to follow the ancient, well-trodden path. And so I went back to the early writings of the early church fathers, and I went to the writing of the contemplative saints like Saint Teresa of Lisieux, John of the Cross, gnarly Spanish writer, poet from the 1500s, Teresa of Avila, also from Spain, and Bernard de Clairvaux, and all these, John Paul II even, just great, the mystics that had, what I mean by that is people who, when they prayed, they sensed God's presence in their lives. And if you synthesize those authors, there's this pattern that you go through. The first one would be the lesson of detachment. And there's just kind of this process of purgation and sometimes a sense of abandonment by God. And you go through these seasons in your life, and the whole purpose of it is so that you just over time just become one with it. John of the Cross, when I was young, I picked up that book. I had an incredibly powerful conversion experience when I was in college, when God just infused His grace in my life. And I was like, I saw that book, John of the Cross, Dark Night of the Soul, and I go, well, I guess I skipped a step. Cool, because I don't have to go through that, because I mean, I'm on this amazing ride right now with the Lord. But it turns out you don't get to skip any steps. And so this book goes through the arc of my life, and part of it is very dark times, and lonely times, and confused times. But the dark night is there for a purpose.
Talking about the dark night, when you were in Minnesota and you decided to take an adventure and go to Hawaii.
Well, wait, no, actually, I lived in Minnesota for like 3 or 4 years. I was raised in California up in Santa Cruz.
Okay.
And here I'm a California surfer kid, Beach Boy era, right? And my dad says, moving to Waco, Texas. So I show up in Waco, and it's like, I'm a surfer dude in the heart of Texas. And there was another guy that moved at the same time, surfer from Southern California. We kind of hung out, but people were like kind of mesmerized by us, because when we first showed up, we never did really look like them. You know, I wore baggy surf trunks, and we had a pool. People come over and they'd be wearing those little, they called them swimsuits, and I wore those baggies. What we call them? We called them baggies because they were baggy. And so I didn't quite fit in there. I was a fish out of water. It was landlocked. It was desperate. And then I ended up eventually going up to Minnesota, and because of my career, got married, moved up there, and just feeling I would go down the rapids on a canoe, and if I was on a lake, I'd ask people to splash me because I just couldn't, you know. So there was really about 10 years when I didn't go to the ocean. And then I just felt, compelled to get to California, and then I lived there for about 14, 15 years again, back to Southern California, surfed Malibu. And then it was a season in my life where I said, I just can't, I've done everything there is to do, I've surfed every wave there is in California, and I used to go to Hawaii once a year, then twice a year, then bought a home there, and then 5 times a year, and finally I said, what am I doing? So I pulled up sold my CPA practice and stepped out of the box and moved to Waikiki Beach.
Wow. Not knowing really what the future was going to hold for you.
Yeah, I was focused on the ocean. And that's all the future I cared about. And I think that's a lot kind of like a walk with God. If you just kind of focus on Him, everything else takes care of itself.
How, from a non-surfing standpoint, what makes a good surfing wave? What is a wave? Why are there certain places that waves are good and others are not? And then the timing. What is it about waves? I mean, can you tell us?
Isn't it phenomenal? I mean, think about this. When you ride a wave, you're actually riding a wave from the energy pulse from 13.5 billion years ago at the birth of the universe, right? I mean, right, the first thing that happened was radiation. That's a wave.
Mm-hmm.
And so the energy that we're riding is like, when you're riding a wave, you're connected with the birth of the universe. And so waves are, I remember when I was a little kid, the first sense I had of wonder, that sense of wonder when the universe opens up before you, go, wow, it was like I was sitting on the beach, Seacliff Beach. Some people may know that place. There's a sunken cement ship out there up by Santa Cruz. And I was looking at these waves coming in, and a log rolled up that had Japanese writing on it. I go, well, this came all the way from Japan. And I was thinking, these waves are coming from across the Pacific Ocean. They've been breaking here since long before I was born, and will be when I'm dead. And then I remember I saw a sailboat going over the horizon, thinking, this guy can go wherever he wants to, he's got a sail. And that sense of that endless, sense of journeying opened me up to the reality of God. This wasn't just happened. There was a creator that created this, and he must be pretty gnarly. He must be pretty awesome. And he must have a great sense of beauty. And then it was around sunset, and the stars came out. And I remember also there was a red tide, and the waves were breaking, and that luminescence when they would crash. And I just thought, well, if he made this, he made me too. And it made me feel small, but it didn't make me feel insignificant. They say the beginning of wisdom is fear of the Lord. And I was just reading the Bible, how often Christ's disciples were freaked out, when they were around him, because Like when God showed up, when Elijah and Moses showed up on the Mount of Transfiguration. I mean, when you see, God is a fearful being, but the beginning of wisdom is fear. The beginning of fear is the beginning of wisdom, but the end of wisdom is love. And so I came to that conclusion that even though I'm insignificant and small, what makes me significant is that God made me. And that began a journey for me, kind of like the search of the Holy Grail.
In your book, you're talking about your life, the arc of your life. At the end, you hand paddle on your board from one island in Hawaii to the other islands. Like, how many miles was it?
Well, that's a treacherous channel. I pedaled my bicycle from San Diego to Jacksonville, Florida. That was easy compared to that paddle.
Oh, my.
A lot of people know the story of my friend Clyde Cow, his brother Eddie. A lot of people know about Eddie. You see bumper stickers, Eddie would go. Eddie was on the main voyage of the Hokulea. And in that channel between Molokai and Oahu, it broke up in heavy seas. That's one of the most treacherous channels in the world. It has so many factors going with it. It has the natural ocean river gets narrowed down between those two islands, so it causes an upwelling. It's like two miles deep there, and there's this kind of a boiling of the ocean. It doesn't know what to do with all this volume of water, like the kind of Bernoulli effect in a pipe or pilot.
How did you? What encouraged you or gave you the idea to go across?
I had a home in Molokai on the west side, and I would look over at Oahu at night, and I would have my Mai Tai, and I would go, I could paddle that thing, and so naturally, when you think like that, then you got to do it. But that crossing the currents, there's the ocean current flowing this way. Then there's a very strong wind current, which is generated by the change in temperatures that this upwelling in the ocean causes. And then you've got the tidal swings, and then you got wind chop, and then you've got, on that day we had like a 14, 15 foot face ground swell, maybe it's bigger than that, coming from the other side. So there's just all these things you have to deal with, and so to cross that 25, it's only like about a 27-mile channel, but if you go well over 30 miles to get there, because you have to paddle that way to end up over here. So yeah, when I made it across, towards the end, I was going really well. Towards the end though, it was such a big day that I'm going to leave when the tide is sucking me back to Molokai. It'll make it hard to get out of Molokai, but I'll get there in time for it to push me in. But because of the big surf and all that, I got there late. So not only did I have the ground swell, the wave exploding against the wall in Waikiki, down by Hanauma Bay, pushing the rip back at me, plus the tide pulling back, plus the wind, plus the current this way, and all that stuff. The last 3.5, it took me 10 hours and 19 minutes. I had a total of, I'm sure, less than 6 minutes of rest.
Wow.
Because if you rest, you just lose so much ground. And the last 7 miles were a total battle. You couldn't stop even once. Halfway through that 7 miles, I got stung by probably a dozen man-o-war, which people know man-o-war stings, they really hurt, But I was being pushed along the coast. I couldn't get in, and then finally, I had to come back in to the Hawaii Islands. So, that was I was thinking, this is going to be a really good story, if I make it. So, I think in life it's good. I always set a physical challenge for myself every year. Maybe it's getting a black belt or rappelling or a skydive or something. But
was the tandem surfing one of those challenges?
Well, actually, tandem surfing, I remembered as a child seeing it from the cliffs at Steamers Lane in Santa Cruz. I don't know who I was looking at, but it was probably Mike Doyle and Stephen Barry Bainey and those legendary guys back then. They were doing shoulder stands, and I got to do that, And if you look at me, I'm not going to be Kelly Slater. I'm a bigger, bulkier guy. I'm not going to be hanging 10 on a longboard. I guess God made me for a purpose. I'm perfect for tandem surfing. So, and I remember I was judging a contest about 1995, I think it was, and I don't even remember where it was, and maybe it was Doheny or someplace. And I was judging this event, and my buddy Mike Spence is sitting next to me, and I see this guy walk down the board. He's got this big old log, and he throws it down, and I go, "Wow, that's a big board." And then, like 5 minutes later, this other guy's carrying this big old heavy board, throws it down on the ground. I go, "There's two of them." And I could only think of one thing. I go, "Mike, it's going to be a tandem contest," because it had disappeared. In the late 80s, with the rebirth of pool, when longboarding came back, tandem surfing gradually came back. And I judged that contest. I didn't know a thing about it. And then I went down and said, I told him I got to take a bathroom break. I went down and grabbed one of those guys and said, I have to learn how to do this. So I think I started tandem surfing in '96, and I love it. I mean, it's, for a surfer, in Hawaii, first of all, here on the mainland, you're a shortboarder or you're a longboarder or you're a boogie boarder or you're a stand-up paddler. But in Hawaii, you're all of those, and you spearfish and you sail and you paddle canoe and you're a full-on waterman. Right. So in Hawaii, the tandem surfing is just part of the regimen, and with the resurgence of tandem surfing, the best surfers in the world are the ones that are on tandem surfing.
But with tandem surfing, though, you went on to some major achievements there.
Yeah, the thing about tandem surfing is, think about surfers like, they say they're like herding rabbits. Think about tandem surfers. It's really tough to pull off a tandem event, and so somewhere around 2006, we created the World Tour of the International Tandem Surfing Association, and the second year we had 64 teams from around the world. I took tandem surfing to Australia, to New Zealand, to Europe a lot, and here to the East Coast. And the ITSA was kind of my means of spreading the aloha of tandem. But that became, I won a couple world titles, but that became a real serious thing about something that's so beautiful. And so I kind of told them, you guys run it now. I want to go out and do fun tandem. I want to focus on the beauty of tandem and the fun of it. And you guys can have all the tandem drama. I'm going to go out and start having fun. So in the last few years, we started doing the Bears Wave expression sessions, and Dick Gatry here, who, by the way, came out here in 2001 with Mary Osborne, and we did an exhibition here for him. He's such a great man, such a sweetheart. So we did that. We did one for him just this year. But Richard Salek, just with Phil last night, his brother, who we love so much. We lost him about a year ago. He opened the door for me to bring tandem surfing to Cocoa Beach. First year I was there, I probably lifted 100 girls, and not a single guy would walk up and say, "Teach me." Because the problem with surfers, problem with a lot of us, is we get good at something and then we don't want to look stupid again. And I used to tell my kids when they come home from school, "What'd you fail at today?" Because I don't care what you succeeded at. What did you try that you couldn't do, that was too big for you to do? Like my black belt creed, my motto was from scripture. My first black belt was, "Lead me to the rock too high to climb, and I will climb it." King David, right? So I always like to see people try new challenges, and the surfers here for a while maybe they looked at me and thought, "Well, you got to be big like Bear." And I brought some teams out, and the guys tend to bulk up when if you love tandem, you might end up going to the gym more and stuff. But the breakthrough came when I started getting guys that weren't that big to do it, and they realized, wow, this is about technique and timing. And the hardest lift is where the girl stands in your hands, and I think I'm the only one that's done it in competition in 40 years. I did it in France, La Canal. And that sounds like it'd be really hard, but if you can do this with 125 pounds, you can do that with a girl if you know the technique. And a lot of these lifts, I've lifted 3 women in the last 3 years that were great, fit, beautiful women, weighed 175 pounds.
Oh,
and I
wow.
put them in overhead lifts because they were taller, so I didn't have to lift them as far. They were already halfway up there. They were strong. They had good plyometrics. They could leap, and they knew their bodies. I could coach them. They knew if I said sometimes I'll coach people and say, "Move your left hand," and they don't even know where their left hand is. They haven't been coached. They're not used to responding to a coach. But yeah, so tandem surfing is the greatest fun I have in life. And the thing about it is, a lot of surfers, especially you get in a position, you're surfing the same wave, the same spots every day. It's time to start something new. So stand-up paddling is doing that. Tandem surfing, you need a new challenge, and it definitely adds a dimension.
Your book is available on Amazon.com.
Yeah.
What are some ways, how can people, if they're interested in tandem surfing or your book or getting in touch with you, you have a website?
I have 2 websites. They can probably get it at the local Barnes & Noble store here too, unless they're sold out. But most of the local Barnes & Nobles carry that book. And I think, but they can go to my site, deepadventure.com, and there's a buy the book place. They can buy the book, but it'll take them to Amazon, but that's a sure way to find it. I have 2 websites. One is my surfing and my acting website. That's bearswave.com. And then my radio show, Deep Adventure Radio, that's the deepadventure.com site. And that's really more of the the living sight now.
You've been on television, on these different television shows. How did that start,
Well,
and what shows have you been on?
I've always been on a lot of shows, but mostly playing myself, like documentaries or travel shows, or the Fox Fuel series Clean Break, which was basically my concept. I shared it with the producer over a glass of whiskey in Manhattan Beach. Not pitching the show, just telling him I wanted to take men out on adventures like this. It was really, the idea was I wanted to have deep adventure retreats. We're going to do our first one September 12th and the 14th right in Cocoa Beach. Was to take men out on an adventure and then teach and then break out into discussion groups. And he heard that, and I said, I want to film it. And he heard that, and he came back to me and said, I've got a secular version of that. And we did Clean Break. We had Aaron Rodgers' older brother Luke on, and Chase Penny, and I think a Florida guy, Steve Helmkamp, were our three guys. Took them through extreme adventures in Hawaii. And then I was their mentor, because the thesis is sometimes men need to come to an end of themselves to find themselves. And each one of them definitely had a transformational experience. And then the next year I was just in the first episode, and they went to New Zealand. So they found a New Zealand mentor. And then I so I've done a lot of travel shows. It's just, I don't know, I have too many to remember. But recently I had an experience here in Cocoa Beach. I was here for the, I don't remember what I was here for. I was giving a talk at Holy Name of Jesus Church to the men, the father-son breakfast. And I was sitting in my hotel room, my favorite hotel in the world, the La Quinta Inn by the pier. And someone busted in my room. And it was the third floor, or sixth floor, and I knew security wasn't going to be able to help me. And I looked at the phone, 911 wasn't going to help me. And I was thinking, well, I'm in great shape. I'm trained to defend myself. And this guy's 6'4", and we're probably both going to end up in the hospital. This is going to be really bad. And so I go, as a ninja, you use psychological stuff, and I go, dude, you're in the wrong room. I was giving them a way to leave.
Right.
Because he was probably looking for a little old lady, not me. And he walks in further, and he's looking around, and I go, dude, you're in the wrong room. He's looking like this, and a big smile comes on his face. He goes, oh, I'm in the wrong room. so he was just in the wrong room, right? That's all it was. And I called security. Go, yeah, he was in the 5th floor, not the 6th floor. But that feeling of intensity. A week later, I was in Hawaii and got called in to do the 5-0 audition.
The Hawaii 5-0 audition.
Yeah, and I'm always smiling when I'm in auditions. I just not very good at it. But they wanted me to be this captain on this boat, and who gets hit by a satellite or something. And I just took that exact feeling from that guy walking in my room, and I used that at the audition. And you go, you got the part, So I learned a little bit about acting. Yes. I like to be around, like Steve over here, the cameraman. I love to be around these people because they're so professional.
Yes.
They really are. In Hawaii, it's kind of laid back when you're on a set in Hawaii. That shoot that I did for Hawaii 5-0 was over $200,000 for one day to shoot.
Wow.
So they're pretty professional.
Is there anything you want to share with the people at Island Sunrises? Is there anything else?
Well, yeah. Come listen to my show. I have a great show, a radio show. It started like this. I was telling you how we used to do podcasts in my condo in Waikiki, have a cigar, shot of whiskey. And it's tough having a cigar and a shot of whiskey when you're filming, because you got to have the window shut because of sound. We'd sit in there and just talk story about surfing, and then I began to ask these guys about their lives and stuff like that. And I thought, we could do a show. And now this radio show, it's actually on here in Melbourne on the 9:20 a.m. At noon on Saturdays. And it just got picked up by a network with a couple hundred radio stations, and there's another group that wants to syndicate it. So right now we're on just 3 radio stations, but I think starting in the next month we're going to go up on a ton more stations.
Cool.
And they can actually go to my website and find out more about it, deepadventure.com. Or most people nowadays, they may love the show, but they're not going to, it's noon, I got to turn it on.
Right.
So they can actually, after we air it, we send it up as a podcast. After it's on regular radio, it goes up to the iTunes podcast app, and just search Deep Adventure, and there's all kinds of great shows. Like I had a surfing priest on recently. I always ask the guys to share with us their adventure or maybe their misadventure, and then we talk about that, and then we go deeper into their walk with God. I'm always very curious about people's prayer life. You say to a Christian, if you're not spending time in prayer, reading the Word, you're a poser. It's like in Hawaii, people are on the surf gear. You see it here in Cocoa Beach, but they never surf. If you're not spending time in the water, you're a poser. You're not a surfer. So I was curious about what people do in their just personal time with God. Do you sit an hour a day? I'll wrap it up. I have this 20-20-20 rule. In Hawaii, people ask me, what does it take to surf 20-foot waves. Like my son riding that 70-foot wave at the beginning of the book. And I have this 20-20-20 rule. Every night at sunset, I'm at the beach usually. That's the beginning of my prayer time, my major prayer time. And I hold my breath for the 2 minutes and 20 seconds, or I try to. Sometimes I don't make it. Old Hawaiian tradition to do that and then chant as you pray. So I just will say the name of Jesus as I'm letting my breath out for 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And then the other thing I said, so you have to be able to hold your breath for 2 minutes and 20 seconds. You also should be able to paddle your surfboard for 20 minutes without stopping. I mean, not 20 minutes, 20 miles.
20 miles.
Without stopping. Because if you're going to ride 20-foot plus waves, you know, that can quickly build to 30-foot plus before you even know it. So you need to prepare for that. And then I also, with my son, before he went and surfed these monster waves, the biggest waves ever ridden, probably less than 10, certainly less than 30 people have ridden a wave that big.
In a wave that will kill you.
Oh yeah. Oh no. When you surf waves like that, you decide up front you're going to die. I mean, basically you know you're going to die. And then you have a commitment that your tow-in partner you wear a little hook right here, right? So your tow-in partner will hook you out of the water and resuscitate you. But if you don't have the firm recognition that you're willing and probably, you have to say I'm going to die, and then you're okay to go out. But that summer before, when my son, we'd been training for big waves his whole life, when we'd go out in Waikiki, like quarter of a mile out, eighth mile out, drop down on one of the reefs, grab a big rock to hold you down, and then you run underwater. So you dive down 20 feet and try that. Try running the length of this field here while holding your breath. It's hard. So that's my 20-20-20 rule. And then I tell people, you know, if you want to walk with God, that's the best wave you can ride. You know, I always say the most radical thing you can do in life is abandon yourself to the wildness, the adventure of God's will. You know, but the way you do that is by spending time with Him and in His Word. So if you're not spending 20 minutes 3 times a day with God, then you're a poser, because there's no substitute for time in the water. If you're a surfer, there's no substitute for time in the water if you say you love God. And sometimes people can do that all at one time, but the hour of power, as Fulton used to say, right? Well, I'm really serious and dedicated about this. If you're not spending time with God, if you're not opening yourself up to the creative universe, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I think surfers know this better than anyone. Because when you're surfing, you feel that oneness with creation, and it has to make you feel that sense of the wonder of the Creator.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Yeah, and we love Cocoa Beach. We love the aloha in the water here.
Awesome.
A lot of ways it's more aloha here than even in Hawaii.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, let's go get some tacos.
Excellent.
Okay, aloha.
Thank you.